Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Galatians with Bjorklund.
Galatians chapter 4 is a chapter that is really about the essence of gospel faithfulness in terms of not returning to the law. And it's told through analogy and analogies that aren't necessarily close to where we live today, meaning when you hear them at first, you might feel a little disconnect from them. But I think it's one of those chapters that's worth the time to dig into because there is something profound on the other side that if we really can grasp it, can make a difference in our lives. So this chapter begins by saying, what I am saying is, which is a clue that he's still continuing the argument of chapter 3, which is about really becoming children of God and how you're under the custody of the law, which was at the end of chapter 3. And then how he says, but you're children of God through faith. And then he says, what I'm saying is this, that as long as an heir is underage, he's no different than a slave, although he owns the whole estate. And then at the end of this first little section, he says this in verse 6, because you are his sons, God sent his spirit, the spirit of his son into your hearts, the spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. Since you are his child, God has made you also an heir. So here you get this picture of an heir and a son instead of a slave. This certainly doesn't negate the New Testament image and metaphor of being a slave to God, but here Paul's using it as a slave to the law, a slave to what has been, and saying when you become a child of God, there are some things that change when you have the spirit of adoption. And certainly he's saying that because of the time stamp here that he gives it about how he owns the whole estate, but he's under the trustee. And then when he says it's also the elemental spiritual forces of the world, verse 3, this isn't just for a Jewish hanging on to the Old Testament law. This is any system of thought that really is used to commend ourselves and our goodness to God or to ourselves. And the spirit of sonship gives us first this real freedom because we don't have to earn anything. And it gives us the assurance of a future because there's no chance that we lose it as a son. Now, obviously, a human son can lose the inheritance if the father or mother decides that the son isn't worthy. But the analogy here is, again, the freedom, the future, and the fortune. An heir is somebody who gets everything. And notice that this pushes into this idea of the Spirit and crying out, Abba, Father, no longer a slave, but a child, because God has made you an heir. And so this is pointing to the depth of this relationship and saying that when you come to Jesus, you ultimately leave behind this kind of slavery, this kind of development of natural law. And here's the thing on the other side of that, and that is whatever your standard is, you will either in your mind say, I live by it, therefore I'm good, or you will be able to say, I can't live by it, and therefore I need a Savior. And the freedom comes from the Savior. The assurance of the future comes from a Savior who's not us. And that's the freedom that is there. And if you think about it, it is so hard to live by even your own standards. To just simply say, I'm going to do X, and then you don't even do it. I can't tell you how many times I have made an exercise plan for myself that was way too aggressive, my standard, quote unquote, And then a week later, I'm saying, I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I can't. I won't. And that's just a goofy example, but that is the essence of needing a Savior and the freedom of sonship. And so today, where is it that you are relying on your standard rather than a Savior?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.